Hi guys, how are you all? Again, we are here for our third episode of the API Autopsy series. Today I'm a little down. So actually, yesterday I had a long night, so bear with me. Mike, I was hoping, how should I actually introduce you? Should I introduce you as a solution architect or a YouTube influencer? Which one would you want to pick?
Well, I mean, Rajesh, due to our recent fame on YouTube here, I think we've become YouTube influencers. I'm pretty sure. I mean, my 8-year-old son said I'm a YouTube influencer, therefore you're a YouTube influencer. We're definitely. And on that note, like every other YouTube video, I just like to take a moment to thank our sponsor today. Our sponsor is the NGINX swag store, where you can go and get beautiful cotton blend t-shirts. There you go. There's the link below. So I'd like to thank them today for sponsoring this video. And please don't forget, make sure you hit that like button.
Mike, I have to remind you, this is a technical session. Hope you're not going to run a mercantile one, Mike.
Oh, we're not doing that? We don't have a
No, Mike. This one, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm really a little nervous. This is going to be one of the longest demo, and I'm very curious how you're going to actually make it run. Let's actually pray to. We should pray to the Australian god Thor to make sure that it's going to work end to end.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, I will have to come and visit you in Sydney very soon. So no swag stores. Let's get back into this one. But having said that, I will look into the swag store. It's some great materials over there. I'll pass on to you, Mike. I think let's start with the task. Before you start, let me actually give a rundown on what actually happened in the last 2 weeks, because we talked quite a lot about architecture of how to do the APIM, how to do the automation. The first episode is all about architecture. We talked about various management, API management operating model, and the various API management architectures and some security control considerations. That was episode 1. With episode 2, Mike actually took the helm and he showcased more on NGINX introduction, and also he showcased how to automatically deploy controller using Terraform and Ansible. Also, I think he also showcased as a last minute how to automatically deploy the data planes, which is NGINX as a load balancer. So last week we talked about how we are going to actually onboard APIs or onboard provision the load balancer to make it to work with it. So I hope, Mike, it's going to work again. Let's jump onto it. I'll pass it to you.
Fantastic. So this week we'll step it up a bit with a bit more complex demo. It's more likely to fail. We've been pretty lucky so far, so we're going to keep fingers crossed. We're going to cover configuring our data planes via NGINX Controller. So we're gonna do all of our configurations. So with our introduction to NGINX Controller and all the things we talked about, its abilities, one of its main use cases is configuring our NGINX Plus data planes. So that's what we're going to show today.
Cool, Mike. Before I go, and actually something popped into my mind. I'm sure you might be watching the news last week about this whole Bitcoin frenzy stuff happening. Are you into Bitcoin? How many you own, and how rich are you now?
I wish I would have bought some Bitcoin because we wouldn't need a sponsor.
Yeah, true. So overnight, it actually went up really high. It was quite interesting. It was a fascinating week for the whole Bitcoin thing last week. It's quite interesting. Cool. All right. There's something which actually popped up in my mind from last week. We raved a lot about the controller, and I wanted to actually bring something to the table. What is actually the value that controller brings to the table? The NGINX controller here talks about more of a control plane, data plane separation. That's the one thing which I was keep highlighting from episode 1 and episode 2. I just wanted to highlight once again today that that's exactly what I hope Mike is gonna do it, is to separate those control plane and data plane. You deploy your data planes as a gateway, as a load balancer, anywhere you want it on your preferred or decide cloud provider, and then you can configure those NGINX instances through the control plane. So that is the value the controller actually brings to the table. Even without the controller, your data plane continue to work. Without the controller, what you actually will miss is the onboarding part of it. That means you may not be able to onboard. So that level of separation actually helps you to make sure your throughput of your workloads are working fine as it is. Mike, you're about to say something.
I was just ready to jump in and continue that discussion with a demo.
Demo. That reminds me something. Yes. Let's go on to the demo.
Are you ready? Oh,
yeah.
Here we go. I'm looking forward to this. So thanks for that overview. Let me see if I can get this working. So as we continue that discussion on NGINX Controller, I just wanted to, oh, we missed the slide, Rajesh. Did you want to talk about this one or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
See, I told you that. I mean, it was a long night yesterday. It is, I think around 1 o'clock. I went to the bed. It was such a long day. Trust me, I wasn't working for this demo. I wasn't working for some other demo. So the heavy lifting you are doing. So yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yes. Absolutely. This one, I wanted to actually refresh the memory, what we were trying to do. This is one of the recommended architecture for a lot of companies who's actually taking care of north-southbound throughputs for their APIs. So the way how it is being designed here is the people tend to either have a load balancer and a WAF attached to it at the edge, and then the API gateway cluster actually sits underneath that bit. The reason for this particular separation is to actually have the security level of WAF security at the edge as much as we can, like a DOS protection and other signature attacks kind of things being mitigated at the edge, even before it comes to the API gateway. That means the API gateway will take care of all the functional part of it. Actually, I would say a non-functional part of your business need, like rate limiting, like authorization, like spike limiting. All those things will be taken care of by the API gateway. It will be too late if you're trying to stop some kind of a DDoS attack at the gateway level. So this is one of our recommended. But having said that, a lot of customers actually still do it. It still happen to work. So that once after the API gateway cluster, then the gateway actually tend to talk to the services sitting in the third layer where it's actually protected by the gateway. As you can see, the controller actually sits at the side of it, and it can go and configure both the load balancer configuration as well as the API gateway configuration. As you all well know that the configuration for a load balancer and the configuration for API gateway is completely different. So you don't have to go and actually storm your head to go and configure it in a two different way. All you need is a control plane where you actually separate or segregate these two functions. Even the WAF layer can be actually managed by your security team, and the API gateway layer can be managed by your DevOps team or a developer team, where they can completely segregate their responsibility to push those configuration into those two different layers. So that's the one thing which I definitely would love to highlight it. And if anyone is actually looking forward, please feel free to talk to us. Mike, that makes sense?
It does make sense, but I was just curious with the modules on controller, providing an analytics module to see all your statistics and metrics, an ADC module for configuring just standard load balancing your NGINX Plus instances. Why do we need to have an API management module if we can configure it in other modules?
Sure. So the ADC module is kind of a subset for APIM. APIM actually tends to do much more than that. So you can actually onboard OpenAPI spec where you define your endpoints, where you can protect your endpoints, and most importantly, as part of your APIM, you can even bring your developer portal as part of it. Actually, to be honest, I missed that part of this particular design. So as part of your APIM design, what you could do is you can also bring your developer portal to say that this is the endpoints, these are all the stuff it's actually being documented, and you can actually let your consumers or the developers can go and consume it without interacting with the development team. So that's what it actually brings to the table. On top of that, we also bring API specific metrics. So who is using this API? And that level of information comes back from the gateway, which is captured by the controller. And you can export it to any of these log collectors or to the metric system like Dynatrace or the Prometheus or Splunk. So some of them actually, quite easily integrated with the controller. So that is why that particular segregation is. And most importantly, the team who manages the ADC and the WAF may be different from the team who is actually managing your APIM. So these days, I'm seeing a pattern of actually APIM is mostly managed by the DevOps team, and the ADC and the WAF cluster, that layer is actually mostly managed by the security team, where they actually take a decision of what needs to be applied at the edge.
So in this architecture right here, this slide, would I use API management to configure all my NGINX Plus instances?
That is right. So your NGINX Plus is, we keep raving about this one. You could use NGINX Plus for a multitude of use case. Exactly the same instance, but with a different configuration, you could use that as a load balancer. At the same time here, in this particular aspect, you can configure that as an API gateway, where you can apply more and more security compared to the load balancer concept. But it is exactly the same NGINX Plus instance. The configuration is the one which differentiate what type of function you're going to apply on top of NGINX Plus.
All right, cool. All right, well, cool. Thanks for that. That's a fantastic overview of controller and what it can do. So let's start digging into the weeds, shall we?
Sure, please. I've been waiting for it. I'm a bit nervous.
And keeping everybody in suspense. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
So before we start the configuration in the demo part, I just wanted to do a high-level overview of the way the objects are dispersed throughout controller. So we talked about earlier the ADC module and the API management module being two separate modules within controller. And so some of these objects that you see here now apply to the API management. Some of them apply to ADC. Some of them do both. So if we look through here, you might have remembered when we looked at the controller GUI last episode or the episode before, there was a drop down and we had platform, infrastructure, services, security, and analytics options there. Well, security is a subset, but anyway, the platform one we used to show the licensing, right? For example, all the configurations, the role-based access control, how to define roles and users were for the platform. The infrastructure is when we finished the demo where we deployed the NGINX Plus instances, where we showed that they had registered properly with controller. The services is where we're going to focus on today. And the services are divided up in containers and objects. So the first container we want to talk about is environments. So this gives you an ability to configure your other objects into a specific environment. So you can see just underneath services, the environments block is there, and you would define your environment maybe as a prod or a test or a dev, maybe a specific apps prod, or so in our example here, we're using a JServices API, and we have a production or a example environment, I think that's what I called it, for that one. And then when we move down to the next one, and the environment, you see the environment contains apps, gateways, and certificates. So if we take each one of those, from the least significant to the most significant, we start with certificates, and environments own the certificate key pairs for your SSL transactions, right? So very simple object there where we upload the key and the certificate for our applications. It also contains gateways. Now, gateways are where we define which NGINX Plus instances are going to contain the configuration for our application at a high level. It has a few other options, which I'll go into when we start showing those objects off. But at a high level, that's basically gateways where you define the configuration for your specific NGINX Plus instances. And then the most important being the apps container allows you to store your components. Now, you define your app's name, and then within that, you define components. And components basically are the paths of the application. So if you have a component that is /API, you can say that component goes to a different URL or a different workgroup backend. But that's where, and again, I'll go into more details when I show the components. And then the other set here too is published APIs. And when we get into the demo for API management, we'll show how we publish APIs and then they are automatically turned into services, which then get deployed onto gateways. The other ones we show here, the analytics tab is where we can see all the up-to-date metrics and statistics on how our applications and our NGINX Plus instances are doing. And then security, which we'll touch on more on the next episode. Don't want to get ahead of myself. The next episode's going to be amazing, of course, amazing. Where you can define identity providers, WAF protection, rate limiting, amongst a few other things. So with that being a high-level demo.
Mike, I actually looking at this diagram, it also making me to think that there are components which I don't have to recreate again and again. For example, as you mentioned, the environments. If I have a dev environment or product environment where I will have to push more and more API, that means it's more of a one-time task of creating my environment. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And thanks for reminding me that I forgot to mention that. That's excellent catch there. I'm so glad you're here, Raj, you know.
I'm here. I'm awake. I said I was only tired, but I'm awake.
Awesome. All right. So let's jump in. Finally, this demo. All right. So we're going to start here on the controller site. So those sections that I just talked about here, you can see the analytics, the services, the infrastructure, and the platform, which I referenced just a second ago. If we start with the infrastructure, this is where we left off last week. So last week, we deployed these instances in an automated fashion and registered them with controller, all using Ansible and Terraform. So this is where we're going to start this week. We're going to jump into the tab that I mentioned we're going to work on today, which is the services. And we're going to go into the services environment. And of course, the first thing we do, you remember the top level object was a container to set up our environment, right? So we'll go in, create our environment, and we'll say, okay, this one is a JService application. So we'll say this JService environment. We can put a nice fancy display name, a neat little description. We can do tags, and tags are really interesting once you get into the analytics section and you want to monitor the statistics specific to your application or tags. So it helps you to do that. But once you complete all this, we'll say, you know, cool service, you know, yeah. We'll get down here. One of the most basic, just a second, hang on, I'm getting there. Where we get to the API request, right? And what's really neat about this is when you decide that you no longer want to use the GUI anymore, or you want to integrate your stuff into your CI/CD pipeline, you can just cut and paste these API requests to do the exact same thing you would do from the GUI.
Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, I told you already, I'm already a little tired. If you're going to use this UI and going to navigate through, I'll definitely sleep. Most importantly, when I go to customers' place, they don't actually go through, most of them, they don't go through UI. It's good to have a UI for analytics and stuff, but I have to create an environment. If I have to go and create APIs and stuff, I know companies actually go and create these things quite often, like 10 times in a day, sometimes 10 times in a week. There is no way a manual task is going to help them to do it. I thought you said you're going to automate this. If it is you,
are you telling me this demo is boring? Is that what I'm hearing you say? Are you calling my demo boring?
Yeah, I don't know which part you didn't understand. Yes, it is. It would be great if you go for an automation, man.
Where did professional courtesy go? You know, it's gone out the window. But you know what? I see your point, Rajesh. I do. I see it, and we're gonna fix this. Because you know what? Why would
automation?
You use GUI? Why would you use a GUI? We're gonna wait for the punchline here, right? Why would you use GUI when you have an API, right? Is that good?
Exactly.
Is that good?
Yes.
All right. No, fair point. All right. Let's jump over now to the real tool of the day, and that is Postman. How's that? Is that a bit better?
Now you got my attention.
Yeah. Are we geeky enough? Have we reached the geek level yet? We want for this. All right.
Mike, can you actually maximize a little bit?
A little bit. Oh man, now you're testing my my technical knowledge. Is that better?
Yes, it's a lot better. But
Perfect.
let's wait for it for others. If they have any issues, we'll go. But this is good for me.
Fantastic. So yes, so thank you, Rajesh, for keeping me honest and keeping the demo spicy. As we determined last week, spicy demos, they do it. They do it for sure. So we're jumping to Postman, where I have conveniently taken every single one of those API examples from configuring controller and placed them into a Postman calls. So as we're walking through these different Postman calls, we just want to keep track of the JSON information that's being sent for each call, the responses we expect to see. And when you decide in your environment to move these out to some other type of tool, maybe Ansible or Terraform, it's real easy to copy these URLs and these endpoints and these JSON blobs to be able to replicate this into any tool that you have. So starting with this here, the first thing, of course, we have to do is we have to authenticate with the controller, right? Now we've gone in and you can see here, our responses come back with the 204 no content. And normally that would be a red flag because you would think, oh, something went wrong. But actually, that's how we get our session cookie back. That session cookie is the way we have authenticated. And you can see here in my Postman example, I've used variables to define the username and password for my controller instance. So we sent that, we get a cookie back, and that cookie is what I use for all the rest of my calls to make sure I've authenticated properly. So if we want to deploy our application now, that environment example that I just showed you, we can jump in and we can see that environment call copied directly from that controller instance. So if you remember, we looked here, we can see post API and then that information. We can see I just cut and pasted it directly out. Of course, there's a bit of syntax change there. And we can send that as well. So now we can go back, we can see we got a 201 created. Something to note that if I send this again, I get a 200 OK. And that tells me that the value is already there, and it also allows me to do updates. So if we go back here and we refresh our environments tab, we can see that that environment's been posted into here. And if we look into this a bit further, I know the GUI is not interesting, but you can see it's actually updated the information that we need to see in our Postman. So if you did this and you didn't like something and you wanted to do an edit, you can make the change in Postman, or you can cut and paste it out of the web GUI. So if we go back through here and speed it up a bit, remember in the objects we showed the certificates. So we want to post our certificates. So again, we get a 201 created. And we can see in the body here that we've named the certificates. We've got a key. We've got a certificate pair, public certs. And again, if we go look in the GUI, we can see our certificates have automatically been uploaded. And we can get the detail on the certificates too. So we can see our common name's been defined, subject, how long we got till it expires. And there's an alert at the top of the page to say this certificate is going to expire in less than 30 days. So as an administrator, I can get an alert that says, you know what, cert in one of your apps is going to expire in less than 30 days. You should probably do something about that.
Mike, now I like the UI. So now for this particular purpose, I would go for a UI. Oh, sorry, go on.
And like you said, that's what it's for, right? The analytics, the metrics to see what's configured. So no, you're right. It has its purpose, you know? So then we move along and we do gateways. And if we remember, the gateways are where we define which NGINX Plus instances, which data plane instances we're going to configure. So you can see here, I've named it JService. So JService, just as an update for you who don't know, is a online API that you can query for Jeopardy questions. So if you want to practice your Jeopardy, it's a good API, and we'll see an example of that in a second. But you can see I've picked, again, another variable, so I can change my instance name as I'm deploying this. So a part of that CI/CD pipeline reuse of code. And then you can see, too, I've defined my URI here as http jservice.example.com. Of course, I don't own example.com, so this is a local test environment. But, you know, we can post this here, send it. Again, we see the 202 accepted. Now, you get a 202 when it's taken the configuration, but sometimes these configurations take more than a split second to deploy to your NGINX Plus instances in this case. So they sent the 202, and that's controller saying, you know what, your code looks good. You've submitted it properly, and I accept it. If we send it again, we're still deploying. We can go through and we can see here that it's letting us know what's happening to the state. So you can see the self-config state configured to 0, so it's not done, but it's configuring. So you can see that 1 there, true for configuring. So it's packaging the configuration up and it's pushing it out to our NGINX Plus data plane instances.
Mike,
Then yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just checked the time. We are already 25 minutes into the thing, and I think we need to do a bit faster than what we actually, thought.
You're right. Demo, too much demo. All right. So we sent the gateway. Let's just fast forward. We'll send the application, right? We got 201 created, and we'll create the component, right? And then let's get to the demo. Hopefully it's completed deploying, and we will go and see that our service.
Hold on, Mike.
It works. How good is that? Is that good? What's wrong? Isn't it?
Mike,
you don't like it?
Mike, did I see you're using HTTP?
Well, yeah. Is there something wrong with that?
Everything is wrong about
it. Why is that?
Mike, who on earth who would use HTTP in a production if I have to go into it? How do I actually, manage a secured connection between an API if I have to go with deploy APIs for banks and stuff? Unacceptable.
Once again, you got me. But as everybody saw me load the cert earlier, you know what's going to happen next. We're going to do.
I thought you were going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're going to do a quick update, and then we can send that. Boom, just like that. We go back to our demo, and we say, you know what? HTTP is just not good enough. Let's do HTTPS. Oh, and we got our error for my self-signed certificate.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll accept that risk because I signed it. And then boom, look at that. We're secure in our environment.
I love that lock on the left-hand side. Now it's
even with a little exclamation point, still just amazing. Amazing. All right. So with that, that's the demo for the ADC. And I'm sorry it took a little longer than we anticipated. Let's jump into API management. So yeah.
That's right. Mike, I was actually hoping to talk a lot about the APIM purpose and the usage of OS. I don't think we have enough time, to be honest. So while I'm talking, if it is okay with you, if you could actually jump into the APIM straight away, because we don't have enough time. I really dying to see how you are actually, because with the APIM, I want to push OpenAPI spec or Swagger file, it used to be called, because that's how most of the developers in the wild, they tend to do it. When they actually develop a service, they tend to actually create an OpenAPI spec as part of their service, and then they use the OpenAPI spec to configure their API. So I would love to follow the same path to help the developers to quite easily define their, the version, and through OpenAPI spec on their endpoint and their methods, all of them through OpenAPI spec, and configure their API through API gateway. Does it make sense?
That's fantastic. No, that's that. You know what? That's a great idea. Thanks for keeping me honest. Let's do that. So while Rajesh was talking, I deployed the environment, the certificate key pairs, the gateway, and the application. So remember what all those objects were. They are overlapping objects between the ADC and the API management modules. But as Rajesh said, an advantage of the API management module is that we can import open API specs. So I have one here prepared for you, and just give you a quick idea what that looks like. This is the editor on Swagger.io. Rajesh actually showed me this a few days ago, and I just thought it was amazing. I hadn't seen it before, but Rajesh was nice enough to show me. Thanks, Rajesh. In which you're able to take your open API spec and deploy it here, make changes, provide documentation, which is fantastic. And then when you're done with that, you just copy that open API spec. You pop it in as a file, as a JSON file within your Postman, and then you just send it to the controller. And then when you go in and look in the controller, we can see here, when we click on our APIs option, we can see that the API has been deployed and we have our version 1, right? And we can go in and we can see that that open API spec has provided all the resources in here and published them for us, which makes things a lot easier to configure. And one other thing I mentioned too is that by default, it's added some documentation in there as well. So all that information has come from just the open API spec, which is a big advantage. So Is that what you wanted to see so far?
That's cool, exactly, because we talked about the APIM briefly. So when you actually onboard an API, I would prefer to push the documentation as well to the developer port, because it's a two-step process. There's no point in actually doing it this separate and the other step separately, because currently the developers tend to develop their service, and each of their service, whether it depends on Spring Boot or Node.js, etc., the code tend to generate this OpenAPI spec on the fly. So if we are able to help those developers to push that automatically to the controller, which can configure the gateway, which can configure the API developer portal, that will be fantastic to see.
Yeah, it definitely makes things a lot easier for those developer guys, and even the infrastructure guys, right? Whoever may be using the tool in your enterprise.
That's true. Yeah, they don't have to be a bottleneck anymore. So all they have to do is to open the endpoint. Boom, it's done.
So after we push the API definition, of course, the next thing we need to do is publish the API. And I just want to look at this real quick to see the information that's needed to push the API, to publish it, right? So of course, we need to reference our API definition, which we just uploaded. We also need to reference our gateway. So as you recall, that's our NGINX Plus instance placement and our URI we're going to use to access it. So we need those two bits of information to then merge the published API with our data plane. So we'll send that one off. We get our accepted, because again, it's going to take a second to configure. But the one last thing that we do need to do in here, and I'll just highlight real quick, is that we need to tell our gateway reference what all the endpoints are. So you can see here these URIs. We've got 4 endpoints that we defined in our APIs. And so if you remember, we looked at here when we looked at the routing, we've defined 4 endpoints. And you can see here there's no connection between the endpoints that we've defined in our API, our open API spec, and our components, because we haven't created a component yet. It's a real important step you don't want to miss there. And that's so what we can do is we can push this out, defines our component. You see it's been accepted. It's going to get pushed to the data plane instance. And we'll just refresh this real quick so I can show you how that's updated the screen. If we look at routing now, we can see we have a component that's been defined, and all of our URIs, our routes, have been defined in there as well. So with this, we're able to go to our demo. And this time, I put the SSH in there first. Oh, see, so we got our little warning here because of our self-signed certificates. And you can see here, I can query it, and I can do a search for all the countries that have the word United in them. So, of course, I probably shouldn't have done United, the new home here. There we go. We need all the Australia ones. And what's also good is we can add fields, right? With this particular API, we can say we want the fields just name. And we can send that off, and we can say, okay, the countries with Oz in them are Austria and Australia. So now we've shown that that new application is working. We can go back and show. What else should we show, Rajesh? Is there something else?
Actually, one thing which I noticed, you have become an Aussie now by making that filter. So normally you tend to go on straight for United States because you are from there. So now you are becoming a real Aussie. Oi. Good.
They're beating it into me, right? Yeah. So what we want to show next is day-to-day usage of API management. And with day-to-day usage, of course, what we're going to be doing most commonly is updating our API definitions. So, of course, what do I have here? I have our open API spec, again, from our Swagger editor, of version 2. Now, let's just go ahead and post that. And we'll go back to controller and see what happened. We'll see that when we look at our APIs now, we have our REST countries API. This application here that I'm using is a different one from the previous example. So REST countries allows you to query information on different countries using a REST API. Very convenient. And we can look at here, we can see now we have 2 versions. So we have our original version 1.0, and we can see it's been published API. So we showed that in the demo. And now we just upgraded and added version 2.0, right? And we can see it hasn't been published yet. But we can see in this new version, we've now got 7 resources instead of the original 4. So we've added a few new endpoints, right? So we're upgrading our application. We're making it better. We're adding features. So let's go and publish that, right? So before
Mike,
we go and publish, yeah.
quick reminder, we are just 5 minutes past the 1:30, so just keep it in mind.
I'm racing. I know we need time for questions. Sorry.
Yep.
So before we do that, what we want to do is one other example is we want to show a dev portal. So you remember in the Open API spec, we referenced that there's a lot of documentation that can be added, and we want to have a nice way to view that. So development portals have been added to Controller and API management as a feature you can deploy yourselves. So I'll deploy this dev portal, and then I'm going to update our published API. So this is our new 2.0 version. We'll send that update. You can see now we're referencing the 2.0. And if we go back in here, we can see that, let me just do a little refresh here of our API. We can see now that 1.0 is no longer published and 2.0 is published. And we've got a new object in here that's a dev portal. So if we go look at that, we can see in our dev portal, that should be, I know, and I'm sorry, I didn't put a certificate in the dev portal, but you can. I know Jeff is going to call me out on that. I know it. I know from now, got to have it. So in this one here, we've got 4 endpoints. So you can see there's still 4 endpoints.
Mike, that's what I'm about to ask. Supposed to be 7.
You're right. You're right. There was 7 in the new one. Why don't we have those 7? Because we didn't update the components. So
Total, okay.
To our last one, right? So those components aren't available externally or in our dev portal. So we'll send our last post here, or put, and then we'll go back and we will refresh our dev portal, and we can see that the documentation is automatically updated with now 7 endpoints. So what's amazing is I didn't have to change any documentation. I can go in from our API spec and I see an example of a call that we can make, what responses we're expecting, any details, right? Maybe GitHub links that explain more detail. But all that is updated automatically from your calls. So I believe that was our last Postman call. And I would just like to highlight one other thing. So I touched briefly on the Open API reference that is included in every NGINX controller and is available online. So this one is an example of docs.nginx.com, where you can see all the calls that you need to make to controller to configure your data plane environment. We touched on the Swagger API, but I also wanted to show you real quick that I have updated the API Autopsies GitHub page with the Postman Collection here, if you'd like to try this on your own internal environment.
That's good, Mike. I was about to ask that bit because having that reference will help quite a lot. I could put that as part of my Jenkins or a Bitbucket, and we can automatically deploy this. Whatever, even those click, I don't want to do that. I prefer to actually put part of the Jenkins or Bitbucket, and all those APIs get called quite easily, programmatically whenever the developers wanted to do that. So that is really good. Thank you.
No problem.
We're pretty much close to the thing, Mike. What are we going to do next week? This is good. We looked into the load, how to configure the load balancer in one of the NGINX instance. The other one is the API gateway using Open API spec. So what's it for next?
So next week, we're going to build on this demo, but we're going to make it more secure. Now, you already called me out on not securing my sites using SSL, and we did fix that. But there's a lot more that we can do with API Manager to secure our site. And
yeah, exactly.
One of NGINX's newest products is a web application firewall. Don't want to spoil it, but we'll talk next week. And there's a lot of things that we can add to APIs. Help me out here. What can we add to the API to make it more secure?
Rate limiting, authorization, OpenID Connect, OAuth 2. So yeah, you talked about WAF. So it's a 2 set of security, right? One more goes to a different team, and the application team tend to have a different level of security mechanism, different type of security policies applied in the API. I would love to see that, because that's the only thing I know better. So I'm really looking forward to that final one.
I'm definitely looking forward to next week as well. As a matter of fact, if you want to make sure you have for that for next
Will
week.
it work? Will it work, Mike? You sure?
Ooh. You know what? It'll probably take you to your YouTube page right now, but there won't be any content because
I'll try right away. Oh my, yes, it does.
Does it? Wow. Well, you know, we've got a marketing lady. She's amazing, Cheryl. She's just on top of it. I mean, I tell you, oof. Maybe she should join us in the next episode. How good would that be?
Say hello to us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think.
Good.
Yeah, we should get Cheryl.
We'll shock her next time. Just pull her into the one side. Ask some questions around security.
Exactly. That might be good.
Cool. Hi, Mike. We're coming close to the final hour. I think there are a few questions which we should answer before we wrap it up. If any questions, please feel free to post it here. Happy to answer. Hey, Raj, Mike, thanks for this live stream. Can I manage my my NGINX OSS instances using controller? Yeah, isn't it? It will be cool to do the OSS, isn't it? But unfortunately, as of now, we don't do it. Having said that, we are planning to actually roll out a different solution to manage the open source instances, because as you all know that the NGINX open source is the most used web server load balancer in the world. So having to address that particular market, to help those customers, we are coming up with a different solution, which we will come back to you guys and do a separate demo on that one. The controller may not be an answer, but there is an answer which is on its way. Just hang on to it.
Can I add to that? Sorry,
you go for it.
I would just say that in the past, we get asked this question a lot. And in the past, the reason for that has been because remember we talked about the controller agent gets installed onto the NGINX Plus instance. Well, with NGINX open source being open source, you have the ability to make a lot of modifications, add dynamic modules, change the code. And so it was really difficult for support to manage the controller support, knowing that this agent could be put onto an open source instance and possibly have an issue, right, with any developments or updates that you might have made to your own open source NGINX instance. So that's the reason why, as a support perspective, it was really difficult to manage NGINX open source instances with controller when you had issues, because it was hard to tell what's been made, what's been changed in the open source instance. So like Rajesh said, we've got a product coming out for that soon. So stay tuned. Maybe that'll be our next live stream webinar. You never know.
Oh yeah, sure. Mike, I think this question is for you, Joel J. For Open API, can I use another format if not JSON? I mean, I think it's talking about YAML, I believe.
So you're right. And I just want to go back to this API reference that we have here for version import. And we can go through here and we can see that it does take YAML and JSON. So just to show you where we can reference that information. Fantastic question, by the way. I'm not dogging that at all. Because it was a great segue into how to use this API definition. So you can see here that I just cut and paste the example, and you can see that you put your path parameters in there, and then by setting the content type, you can tell NGINX Controller whether you're sending YAML, whether you're sending JSON. But those are the two formats that are provided. And just to also mention too, we are validating everything against the Open API Spec version 3 schema. So I showed earlier the Swagger editor, which if you have an older API and you want to test it all out, make sure it's all syntactically correct, you can drop it in there and it will update it to an Open API Spec 3.01, as a matter of fact, for your consumption in your own NGINX controller and your API management.
Cool. Can you compare NGINX API management with AWS? Oh, well, that is quite easy. It's because AWS is not an APIM solution. It is purely an API gateway. So you will have to do a lot more things for an API management. So when it comes to NGINX API management, NGINX API management comprises of API Gateway, which is our NGINX Plus, and it has much more that. For example, developer portal and more API-specific analytics, all those things, and it's easily integrated with your design purpose, as well as Mike was actually trying to show. So that level of difference actually gives it. And most importantly, we also let you to embed the security on the fly through the control plane. When it comes to AWS Gateway, you will have to write a Lambda function to do that level of, for example, if you have to secure your services against OIDC or OAuth2 IDP, then you'll have to write a Lambda and integrate that with your AWS API Gateway. That's not the case here. So there are quite a lot, but I won't take much time. But just to give a very high level, AWS is not an APIM solution. It is purely an API gateway. You will have to do much more around it to make it as an APIM solution.
You know, I just realized, were you not able to see my screen when I was showing the?
No, I was hoping to call you out, and then I realized that it is really good. Your face is pretty much reflecting what you're trying to show. So it was fun to watch. I thought just let it go.
I don't understand. You couldn't see the reflection into my eyeballs. I don't understand. Yeah. Sorry about that. So we can see here that this was the import an API definition version that I was trying to show in the documentation here, and you can see here these are the content types that are supported. So and the the Open API Spec v3 schema. So that's where I found that in the API reference for the administrative API for NGINX Controller. And then I was showing here in the Swagger editor that if you have an older API, open API spec, you could drop it in here to update it and make sure it's syntactically correct before pushing it to your API management solution.
That's cool. Thanks, Mike. Mike, I think we should wrap it up with the last question. Do I need reference to get started with API management? There you go. Tahiro. I think Mike is right there. He can actually show you where you can start with it, the API reference place and the resources. So definitely we can share those things along with the email, which we will be sending very soon.
Yeah. So it's available on the docs.nginx.com under NGINX Controller. It's also available within the controller itself. There's a little question mark here that you can click on. It'll open in a new window. And you can go in, and there's an API reference there on the side. The NGINX docs page also looks just like this. So you can go in and you can look at your API reference, and then you'll recognize it because it looks similar to our dev portal and Swagger definition, if it ever loads. There we go. And you can go through and find what particular objects you are trying to find. So I just was showing the version import, but that's two ways to get to that documentation. And then also, if you wanted a reference to get started, like I mentioned before, the GitHub page has been updated with all the JSON Postman collection. So all you can do is just copy this, load it into Postman, and you will have the same looking Postman interface as myself with folders in each one of the posts here. So that's how you can get started, and that's an excellent reference.
Mike, where can Tahiro get the demo if he wants to download the controller? Where can he get that?
Oh, well, that's foreshadowing our next link that's going to pop up on the screen. Wink.
Yes.
There it is, right there. There it is. All right. So using that link, you can go and request your own free trial of NGINX Controller. And as you can tell, not only do I work for NGINX, but I also use an NGINX Controller trial myself by that lovely green banner at the top of the screen, which you too can enjoy when you go download a trial demo license.
Cool. Let's wrap it up, Mike. I think we are almost 4 minutes past the issue time, so let's move on. Thank you very much. We'll actually see you next week with our final episode of this series with more towards the security aspect. Thank you.